Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling tonight.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host. And I would also like to thank you all for tuning in this evening. Last week, we channeled information about the future with our master guide, Laura, Archangel Orion, and Archangel Metatron. They gave us some very interesting insight, and if you missed it, the show's available on our YouTube channel, which is in the name of Barry Strohm. It has over 560 videos at this point. If you'd like to download the videos, just go to Podomatic.com and search Channeling History. Tonight, we're going to discuss what is taking place in our judicial world by channeling three famous Supreme Court justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sandra Day O'Connor, and Antonin Scalia. They were all three excellent people. So please tell your friends so we can continue to grow our audience and get this education out there.
Now, recently I posted a video on YouTube that posted the images of what Jesus really looked like in life, the way the resurrection actually took place, and used evidence from the Shroud of Turin to prove his image and what took place during that resurrection. The video will give you absolute proof that Jesus walked the earth, and only God has the powers to resurrect. So just go to our YouTube channel, and you can see this absolutely amazing video. Before we start, let's do a short disclaimer, and then we'll get on with the show. I don't want anyone taking action on information given through our channelings. The opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parax Network or of our sponsors. Now, before we channel, we also say a prayer of protection. So Connie's going to say the prayer, and then we're going to begin this wonderful show tonight.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen.
Now, we're going to have three very, very strong individuals with us tonight. So we're going to use a roundtable discussion format. It's a little different. It's a little more difficult for me to manage because obviously I have trouble seeing over there. But we're going to ask our guests to each comment on the same question.
We'd like to thank the three of you for coming through for us this evening. Each of you had very strong beliefs and pursued them with honor throughout your lives. As you answer these questions tonight, would you mind pointing out if any of your opinions have changed now that you're on the other side? Please feel free to answer in depth. If we run out of time tonight, we will continue the discussion next week. Okay, I believe we're going to start out with Justice O'Connor. Do you believe that enforcing regulations keeping the homeless from camping in a public area is cruel and unusual punishment as stated in the Eighth Amendment?
This is a very difficult question. I have always felt great empathy in my heart for individuals that are homeless. Many of them have mental problems. Many of them have lost their homes. Many of them are victims of the economy. So in many instances, it's up to us to protect those that need protected. Today, we are seeing many instances where the protection of the homeless by governments is ineffective. There are many instances today where governments, thinking they are helping the homeless, are actually ruining cities. It becomes a question of whether allowing the homeless to basically camp on public property is harming the tax-paying citizens that are actually paying for that property. Governments have to react differently to what is taking place. The absolute power for the homeless to camp wherever they wish on public property does not exist. The laws are meant to protect everyone, and the governments need to step in and do a better job of protecting the homeless. Justice Ginsburg. What people often feel in their heart, and what the Constitution says, and the way that we interpret the Constitution, can be far apart. I feel great empathy for those that are homeless. It saddens me when the government does not adequately take care of these people. It saddens me when the government puts these people in the position that they cannot maintain homes, cannot raise their families, cannot live and enjoy all of the benefits that citizens of this country should enjoy. I felt that there should be little limitations in differentiating between the rights of individuals under the Eighth Amendment. As I watch from over here, I see that unlimited rights under the Eighth are leading to great problems. Beautiful cities are being destroyed because governments are incapable of legislating adequately to assist those individuals to finding employment, housing, and what is needed to get them on the track to live as other citizens live. Sadly, it is in the hands of government to handle this. To throw this situation onto the courts so that these people are protected should not be necessary. It is a very difficult situation. But until the great wealth of the United States is directed towards helping these individuals, I feel that there must definitely be limitations now upon what the homeless can do and where they can do it. Justice Scalia. In my mind, the Constitution protects all individuals equally. An individual that is trying to run his business, to raise his family, to earn a living, to pay his taxes, to do all of the things that are required to make our government function satisfactorily, should not be punished by those individuals that are incapable of earning their own living and are forced to simply live on private property. That is not to say that the government should not have a safety net under these people so that they are not forced to live in the street. But I feel that the protections under the Eighth Amendment do not extend to the point where individuals are allowed to ruin the lifestyle, the way individuals can make a living, and preventing people from earning what is required for their families.
Okay, what is your opinion of the current actions to keep a former president from being on the 2024 ballot under the 14th Amendment insurrection clause?
Justice Ginsburg. All individuals, including past presidents, are entitled to being innocent until proven guilty. Until there is a judicial decision concerning whether the former president conducted insurrection, he is assumed to be innocent. It is not the responsibilities of the court to become involved in presidential elections. It is my opinion that the president cannot be removed from the ballot until he is found guilty of insurrection. Justice Scalia. The court has no business becoming involved in these idiotic situations. Whether or not the president was involved in anything that be considered insurrection must be determined legally. Until that takes place, the Supreme Court needs to remain out of the election process. Justice O'Connor. The Constitution is very clear about innocent until proven guilty. Until a court of law can prove the guilt of the president, there should be no attempts at keeping him off the ballot. Politics and law need to be separate. Today we're seeing many instances where political opinion overrides jurisprudence. But the president or any individual in this country living under our Constitution has a right to a fair trial and the assumption of innocence. under the assumption of innocence and until he is proven otherwise. He should not be restricted in any way from allowing the voters of the country to decide who should be the next president.
Do you believe that President Trump is immune from prosecution for this role leading up into the January 6th because he was president at the time?
Justice Scalia. The President of the United States is in a very special position. He has special protections, and he has a right to privacy in areas that exceed those of other citizens. If he is guilty of a crime, then if it is associated with being adverse to the rules that apply to the presidency, then he should face prosecution. The Constitution is clear that treason or anything that could be extended under that definition is a penalty that should be enforced against the president. Free speech is not treason as long as it does not involve insurrection. There is a chain of judicial procedures that can investigate whether indeed the acts of President Trump fall under a category. But I do not believe that essentially because he was president that he would be immune from prosecution. Justice O'Connor. The President of the United States is one of the most unique individuals in the world because of his protections and because of the latitude that is allowed the president to pursue his duties. He has a right to secrecy because he should be able to rely on those close to him for advice, and he should not be forced to disclose the advice that he is given by others. Because of his powers, he has the ability to speak in situations where others cannot speak. The First Amendment applies to the president as well as any other individual in this country. Presidents often say things, and they have through history, that have led to actions by citizens of the country. Peaceful groupings of citizens is encouraged. When they cross the line of violence, then they should be prosecuted as any other citizens of the country. If violence is instigated by an individual, and that includes the president, then that individual shares responsibility for that violence. The problem comes in defining whether the words of the president stimulated violence and insurrection. That has to be determined by a judicial body. But if the president uses his words to stimulate violence, he is not immune. Justice Ginsburg. As I watched what was taking place, I did understand the possibility that his words could have stimulated violence. As I watched the violence that took place, I tried to understand whether it was a result of the words of the president or if it was not. Many individuals can listen to words and interpret them differently. Many individuals heard the words spoke by the president and reacted to those words without violence. Individuals heard the same words and responded to them with violence. So what I believe it comes down to is the intent of the individuals that heard the words. If those individuals came to that group on that day with an idea that they were going to create violence, then they are the ones that are responsible. Each individual has free will to respond to words as they see fit. You cannot go into a movie theater and yell fire. That is an extreme. I do not see that the president, even though I disagreed with him, used such extreme words. It is up to the judicial system to determine whether the president on that day yelled fire in a movie theater or whether he simply stopped short of it.
Do you believe that a person under a domestic violence restraining order should be restricted from the right to bear arms under the Second Amendment?
Justice Ginsburg. I believe that the wording of the Second Amendment, which gives us every individual the right to bear arms, should be studied in light of modern times. In 1776, everyone relied on firearms. They fed their families with them. They defended themselves with them. The firearms were much different than they are by design today. I do not question the right of all individuals to protect themselves and their families. But I do believe that individuals should be restrained from using some of the modern firearms that are available today. It is a legislative question to solve that issue. About the question of a domestic violence restraining order. If indeed an individual has this order placed against them, they have shown a proclivity for violence that does not exist in the average individual. And I believe that under those circumstances, an individual should be restricted from owning a firearm. The other side of the argument, of course, is that that individual can do great violence with a knife or a club. But at least restricting them from the use of a firearm is a step in the right direction. Justice Scalia. Just because a person has a restraining order against them, they have not faced the judiciary, where the legal system has come to the decision that they are incapable of having a firearm. A restraining order is a good thing. It is meant to protect people. But a restraining order is a temporary decision until the individual has faced a court of law and has been found guilty of a proclivity for violence. He has the same rights under the Second Amendment as any other citizen. I do believe there are indeed instances where firearms should be restricted. But I do not feel that in all instances that should apply. Justice O'Connor. An individual citizen in this country, under the Second Amendment, has a basic right to protect themselves and to gun ownership. I believe that there should be limits upon that ownership. It is quite possible that an individual with a restraining order is innocent. And it is possible that that restraining order, by not allowing him to have a weapon, can stop him from protecting himself as well. Even though an individual is under a restraining order, he still has the right given to him under the Constitution. I think that a restraining order should not necessarily be a reason to take away his rights to protect himself. What I would suggest is a hearing be required in all instances before a restraining order is placed, so that perhaps a justice or a committee can investigate what is taking place and the reason for the restraining order. I do not believe that in all instances an individual should be restrained from protecting himself. It is possible that the restraining order, the reasons behind it, are false. So I think that an in-depth investigation of any restraining order is involved. If the individual is indeed violent, he should be placed under some other type of restraint. Perhaps he should be arrested. If he is truly violent, in many instances, the simple act of telling him he may not have a weapon is highly insufficient. Many individuals, in spite of a restraining order, gain a firearm and create acts of violence. I think that it is necessary that there be greater investigation concerning restraining orders, and that there should be no blanket rule concerning them.
What do each of you consider the limits under the Second Amendment to gun ownership and the right to bear arms?
Justice Scalia. The Second Amendment is meant to give individuals the rights to protect themselves. In colonial times, the only way one could really protect himself was through firearms. There were police departments, but the country was rural, and it basically came down to the individual to protect themselves. Today we have many, many more cities, and many of those cities have higher crime rates than rural areas. Many politicians feel that if you remove firearms, that the crime rates will go down. We have seen, as we watch from over here, we observe that as it becomes more difficult to obtain firearms for self-defense, the good people are less defended, and the bad people still have their firearms and are able to perform acts of violence. And the individuals that have been made difficult to own firearms cannot protect themselves. We are seeing liberalization of judicial policy towards criminals, and we are seeing criminals released with less penalties. In many instances, these individuals become repeat offenders. There are indeed individuals that should never own firearms. There are people that are mentally ill. We see this in many of the mass shootings that take place. I do not see a problem with more intense background checks for firearms. Things are indeed not the same as they were in colonial times. But if politicians continue to irresponsibly restrict the police from doing their jobs, then many individuals live in great fear. The Second Amendment, I feel, is still vital. There are many areas of the country that are still rural, and there are many areas in cities where violence is out of control. Until governments can gain the utopia of safety for all citizens, they must have the right to self-defense. Justice Ginsburg. I feel that there should be a study of the Second Amendment to restate the protections under our modern judicial and governmental systems. The Oregon and Santa Fe trails are no longer traveled, where individuals relied on their firearms strictly for protection. I do agree that there are areas in our country of big cities where crime has been allowed to grow out of control. But I question the ability of an individual to effectively defend themselves without a functioning police force and local government. If there are no police, then anarchy will follow. The Second Amendment does indeed still bring important rights to individuals. But I feel that there are many people that are incapable today of responsibly handling firearms. As I watch from over here, I see drug dealers, criminals perform great acts of violence with firearms. There are indeed areas where individuals should have access to firearms for self-protection. I also see groups of individuals arming themselves as if they're about to go to war against our nation. I think that all individuals that want to own a firearm should undergo strict training and strict background checks. I think that there is a compromise that exists, but that at the present time the politicians refuse to investigate. Justice O'Connor. The Second Amendment is the law of the land. Until that law is modified through legislative process, that remains the foundation of the limits that individuals can go to protect themselves with the use of firearms. Certain states today are limiting access to firearms, limiting access to ammunition, contrary to the Second Amendment as it exists. Many of these same localities are restricting police force. They are passing laws to restrict the judicial system in how they treat convicts with sentencing guidelines. I believe, as I watch from over here, that it is time for legislative bodies to address some changes to the Second Amendment. But as I also watch from over here, I'm seeing individuals attempting to totally limit an individual's ability to self-protection. I feel that there should be no limit on an individual in how they protect themselves and their families. If municipalities pass laws to make protections of individuals and families more difficult, then it is only up to the individual to protect themselves. I believe that if governments realistically look at the situations in their localities and do not let their own individual political beliefs influence the decisions that they make, that it is possible to make some change to the Second Amendment to make it more adaptable to modern times.
Do you believe inmates should be allowed to sue correctional establishments if their rights have been violated?
Justice Ginsburg. All individuals have basic rights in this country. When an individual is incarcerated, they have violated other individual rights. And by doing so, have given up certain of their individual rights. Now the question becomes what the government can do as they control the lives of those individuals that have broken the laws and have been incarcerated. For instance, in older times, convicts have been able to work on chain gangs. They've been forced to labor. They've been forced to do many things. And they've been forced to live under very violent circumstances. In my mind, this is indeed a violation of that individual's rights, even though he has involuntarily given up certain of those rights. So now the question becomes, what rights does that individual incarcerated have? In many instances, those incarcerated individuals are assuming that they have the same rights as a law-abiding citizen. That is not true. I believe that legislative bodies should investigate just what rights prisoners have when they're incarcerated. If indeed their rights are violated by being beaten, by not having attorneys present when they testify, by certain legal rights that they are certainly entitled to, then they definitely have rights to perhaps sue, but to be treated as they should be treated. I think that the legislatures need to take a very, very close look at specific rights that incarcerated individuals are given. Justice Scalia. When an individual breaks the law and is convicted, they forfeit many of the rights that they have. The government, in effect, becomes their custodian. They must follow the rules, and because of what they have done by their own free will, they must follow what they are told to do at that point. They made the decision to break the laws. They were convicted, and they must live in the system that they knew they would have to live in under those circumstances. It is ridiculous to think that an inmate can sue the government, for instance, that they do not like the food that they are fed, that they are not given visitation rights they feel they should have. The legislative bodies must support the judicial system. I think that much of the rights that inmates believe that they have do not exist. Justice O'Connor. I believe that inmates must be protected in having basic rights. I agree that they should have jobs while in prison. They must be given time for exercise, medical care, and they must be treated humanely. But there are definite limitations to what inmates have in the way of rights. Many people believe that inmates should not be punished for their crimes. Incarceration, I feel, is critical, and I feel that there should not be liberal terms of incarceration for major crimes. Drug dealers are destroying generations of Americans. I feel that, in particular, individuals convicted of drugs dealing should serve considerable times in jail. In life, there were not times that I often believed this, and I often felt that liberalization of some of the sentencing policies made sense. But as I watch over here, I see that in many instances, crime is out of control. So I do firmly believe that there need to be limitations upon the rights of convicted criminals.
Okay. If the federal government refuses to provide border security, what rights remain for the states?
Justice Scalia. As you know, when I was on the court, I was very conservative in my beliefs. I feel that a nation cannot exist if it does not control its borders. I feel that border control should not be a political issue, but that border control should follow the guidelines of the Constitution. When individuals enter this country illegally, they are creating crimes. They should be punished because of the crimes that they commit. By definition, if you do not enter this country illegally, you have committed a crime. I sympathize with individuals that are looking for a better life. But the Constitution does not state that those individuals are accepted from the rules of our country. Today we are seeing intentionally that there is no restriction to entrance into our country. Our current government is ignoring regulations concerning people entering illegally. Great damage is being caused locally. The states on the border are suffering great damage. They're not being reimbursed. They're not being given officials to protect themselves. And they're basically being ignored by the federal government. So now the question becomes, what rights do these people have? They have the right to self-protection. They have the right to pass laws within states to help guarantee that those states are protected. As long as those laws are not in violation of federal laws, then those states have those rights. If an individual comes across the border and commits murder, the state has the right to arrest and to prosecute that person, even though he has violated a federal crime as well. But the crime of illegal immigration is not greater than that of murder. The states have a right to protect themselves under the Constitution. Through the years, the federal government has taken away rights of states. But when the federal government refuses to enforce federal law, there's little choice but for the state government to enforce state law. Justice Ginsburg. I feel that many people are entering this country simply trying to find a better way of life, and I sympathize with them. I felt that these people are very sympathetic. But today, as we watch from over here, we're seeing people from many different countries coming across the border. It is definitely a fact that individuals from countries that hate us are now coming with those that want a better life. I think the federal government is creating intense problems for our future generations by allowing these open borders to exist. Federal law is very specific that there are ways for people to enter our countries. As we watch from over here, we are astonished by the number of people that are coming in illegally. We watch as they are released throughout the country, and we watch as they incur great social costs. Our great country has to have a reasonable immigration system. What is taking place has got to be addressed. It should not be a matter of political parties. It should be a matter of the defense of our country. Justice Ginsburg, or Justice O'Connor. I feel great sympathy for those that truly want a better way of life. But the Constitution is very clear that we need to protect our borders. The Constitution is very clear that our country, the defense of our country, is the priority that our legislators should look at. As we watch, we're very saddened that there is no cooperation between the political parties in an attempt to solve the problem of border immigration. There's absolutely no way that millions of illegal immigrants can be processed properly. And there's no way that when you have that many illegal immigrants, that there are not those involved that mean the country harm. I would hope that the political parties would get together and determine a system of immigration that is fair to everyone. One that is fair to those that want to enter, and one that is fair to all of the tax-paying citizens that are living in this country. I must admit that since I am on this side and can truly observe what is taking place, that I have great disappointment in what is happening at our borders. Okay, well, we got through about half the show. So next week we're going to continue this. We have many more questions. I want to thank the three wonderful justices for their opinions on these questions. I know some of them are difficult, and I know many people out there disagree with some of the answers, and as they say, that's too bad. So anyway, thank you. I am so looking forward to you guys coming back next week. And if we don't get done, we'll do it a third week. So thank you very, very much. My 10th book, Modern Messages of the Archangels, is available for purchase. It tells the story of 20 different archangels. They're very, very real. I guarantee you that if you take time to purchase and read the book, that it will go a long way towards changing your life. You can buy personalized copies on my website, barrystrohm.com.
I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening on Channeling History. For 3 years now, we've been trying to bring you the truth about history by speaking to the souls who made things happen. That's how you can make things better in the future, by learning from your mistakes. So thank you all, and thank our three wonderful guests.
Yeah, I knew we weren't going to get through the questions tonight. And I really want to thank these three people. They were incredible spirits. They were incredible in life. And their answers, you could see the disagreement among them at times, but they are incredible intellects even on the other side. So thank you so much to the three of them. I truly look forward to having them back next week. All our shows are available on our YouTube channel. It's in my name, Barry Strohm. Go to Podomatic.com and it will allow you to download them. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for telling your friends about us, and thanking you for being faithful for us. Join us Sundays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.